Welcome to Protecting Your Assets, the show about protecting people, property, and most importantly, protecting your ass. I'm your host, Lucky Luciano, and I'd like you to join me for a fast-paced and often fiery discussion about security issues with my co-host, Brian the Angry Man Clayman. Whether we're piercing the veil of security, talking your duty of care, or raving about the latest technology, we'll share our thoughts on the issues, the trends that are impacting security today and into the future. So grab a coffee and join us for our latest podcast, and don't forget to like and follow us on our sponsor's website, brianclayman.com. And now let's talk about protecting your assets. Hello and welcome to Protecting Your Assets. I'm Lucky Luciano Cedroni, and with me is Brian, the Angry Man Clayman. On today's episode, it's just going to be the two of us, and we're going to switch it up a little. We're going to stick to the what's keeping you up at night discussion because, quite frankly, I think there's a lot to talk about that's keeping us up at night. And so without further delay, I don't need to introduce myself. I'm going to go right to you, Brian, and what's keeping you up at night, and say hello to our audience.
Well, hello, everyone, and I must say that I love doing this podcast because it's rather cathartic for me. It's like therapy. I'm able to get it off my chest. In fact, since doing a podcast with you, Luke, I've probably saved several $1,000s because I don't have to see a therapist anymore. You
haven't seen my invoice yet.
Oh, I haven't seen you yet. Okay, but you're going to be a lot less than what my therapist was charging me, So, what I'm looking forward to today's session because I think what we are going to do is we're just going to talk about some of the silliness or the craziness that's out there. Yeah. And God, there's a lot. And I'm going to start off with this about COVID, surprise, surprise, and vaccines. And, we redid a couple of years ago our kitchen. And it was a $20,000, $30,000 project. It was a big project. And what we did, we planned for it. And we said, what are the things that we need to do to make this project successful? So we said, okay, we're going to have to finance it and get the money, save the money, get the loans. We're going to have to speak with the decorator and have a plan. We're going to have to select what kind of floor we want, what kind of tile we want. And we did this all before we started construction. If your lovely wife, Nikki, wants to invite people for supper, she probably sits down before making the supper and says, what are we going to eat? Who's coming? What do they like? What food do we need? And then she buys this stuff so that when she starts putting it together, she's ready to rock and roll. Right? That's just simple. Yep. That's what normal people do. Now let's put that into the realm of government. There's nothing normal about government. I cannot understand how now finally the vaccines are starting to come. However, we're having trouble distributing it. We have the York Region site crashes on day one. We've got the city of Toronto scratching their whatever they were scratching, trying to figure out who are we going to inoculate first, who are we going to inoculate second, how are we going to do it? Typical across the country. This is my question. I'm getting angry. What the hell have they been doing for the last year? We've been talking about vaccines. We knew this day was going to come. All that we were able to do for the last year is cower and hide. And my question is, while we were cowering and hiding, and I was hiding in my basement, and I was wearing a moon suit and all sorts of masks and helmet and gloves, where the hell was government? Where the hell was General Hillier? Where the hell was York Region with their IT department? Why are they surprised that more than 6 people logged into the computer, the website, to make an appointment on Monday? That is friggin' ridiculous. Let me catch my breath.
You see, and it's finally taken you, 8 months to come around to my way of thinking, because I never had the confidence in government that you had. And we've always fundamentally disagreed on their approach. I know that government's a disaster. We've dealt with them for years. When we ran those big companies downtown, trying to engage them was like pulling teeth. They do not want to come to the table. They don't want accountability, and they don't want to be seen to lead anything. They want to sit on their freaking asses, collect their checks, blame everybody else. That's what we see in the media today. And that's the way we've always seen that. That's our experience downtown. Certainly with me, and the programs that we ran down there. I don't want to name them up because that might identify some of the people that think I'm talking about them, and maybe I am, but the reality is it was a disaster. It was a joke, okay? And the private sector continually had to step up to take some of the leadership in some key areas that people would think should be run by government. And so I will say to you, in response to your question, how do we get to this? Just look at from day one. The pre-planning was out the window, right? Despite years of warning, despite years of so-called white papers and consulting reports that said the epidemic's coming, prepare. And then when it finally hit, we had no masks, we had no in-house capability to produce those masks, and PPE was out the window. Why? Because it wasn't important. They had more important things to spend money on to get votes. So that pre-planning went out the window a long time ago. Since then, the messaging has been a freaking disaster. And even now that they've got the vaccines, the planning is a disaster. We got 34 different response plans in Ontario alone. Like, give your head a shake. How can that make sense to anyone? It's beyond me how ridiculous this has gone. And the public is finally, rightfully waking up to it, getting upset, and rightfully frustrated. And hopefully, some of their heads are going to roll. I won't see it. I mean, it's not going to happen because Canadians are docile and naive, and they're going to probably revote these guys back.
You're not advocating a January 6th in Washington here in Toronto, are you? You're not pulling a Trump on us.
I'm not, but I am.
Because I know that QAnon follows you, and they're waiting for signals.
I do know Canadians, and I know 100% that Prime Minister Fancy Socks will be back in office, regardless of the fact he screwed us over so many freaking times, and people continue to put him back into office. So that's my vent to begin this session. You really got me upset right off the top because I'm just upset. Like it's dumbfounding. I don't understand how it's been allowed to happen. And you got the opposition like that idiot Singh. He just caters to it. You're the opposition. Now's your chance to pull up your socks and show what a big boy you can actually be. And instead he cowers there because he sees it as an opportunity to get some token little wins for his party and his people. It's ridiculous.
It is just incredible. You're right. How partisan this thing is, how petty it is, and how, they always say that if you have problems with your computer, speak to a kid and they'll help you deal with it. Well, I wish government would stop having white papers and think tanks because they take the most simplest things, the most logical things, and screw it up and make it complicated. Continuing on this rant, okay, and moving from COVID to tow trucks.
Oh, yes.
We've had with the tow truck wars here in Ontario, and I suspect similar stuff is happening around the country, is we've had, I think, it's gotten rather nasty, and I heard on the radio today, I think, 35 homicides over the last 5 years linked to the tow truck wars, okay, which is different elements of organized crime trying to muscle in. And after all of the mayhem and all the violence, the government today, I heard the release, comes out with that they've had a think tank and they've analyzed the problem. They've decided what they're going to try, and it's just as an experiment, is to, rather than have the Wild West, so when there's an accident, the radio goes out on the police radio band that we need a tow truck at such and such a location, and every tow truck in the city is racing there, and they're risking life and limb to get there. And they finally figured out, okay, let's dedicate this part of the highway to Company A and the next part to Company B. And then there's no more of this public safety issue. It takes the criminality out of the tow truck industry because you can't muscle in. Oh. It's Acme towing. Well, it's harder to muscle in.
Yes, I will.
You're an old organized crime guy, and I saw that I
you just hit it on the head. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's harder to muscle in.
Well, if you use the taxi industry as an example, where they used to be licensed, or they still are licensed, I guess. But take a look at the Pearson Airport and the licensing debacle there, a selling of licenses. That's what I see happening out of that model. I understand they have to do something, but I think the failure is going to be in the lack of government enforcement and inspections of those of whatever system they put up. The problem is they don't enforce it, they don't police it, they don't have the inspectors, and they don't have the balls to enforce what they're going to lay out there. Otherwise, you can guarantee that if I've got the Highway 400, that slot is going to be available for sale to the highest bidder once I get it, and I'll subcontract that out to somebody. That's what I see happening.
Well, there's a common theme. If government's involved, they mess it up. Because the next example I'm going to give to keep my anger and blood pressure high is the legalization of cannabis. The whole idea of the legalization was to hold it. You know what? Let's make sure that the supply chain is safe. Let's make sure it's fairly priced. And let's put organized crime out of business. So what happens after 3-4 years of this nonsense? The stuff is not competitively priced. The quality is not as good as what you can get for your neighborhood drug dealer. and the delivery fees and times take forever. You call Bruno or Charlie or Susan on the corner, and she'll deliver the stuff, best quality, in no time. So I see a common theme here. Government gets involved and everything gets screwed up. They'll take the simplest thing and make it complicated, make it worse than it
Yeah.
was before. It is just incredible. We saw that when we were downtown also in our partnerships with the public sector, is the different groups we tried to build, the different associations. Right? We always had the discussion. I mean, who should drive it? Should it be the public sector? Should it be the police? Should it be the city? Should it be government? Or should it be the private sector? We always had some very interesting discussions, but I always took the point, definitely not the public sector, definitely not the government. And there's a lot of reasons. It's not that they're bad. It's not that they're stupid. But, certainly in policing, you're on a 2 or 3 year model. So you're working in a department, in a squad, in a section. And in order to advance in your career, after 2 or 3 years, they move you to another job and you've got to start the relationship building again. Whereas on the private sector, we're in the same jobs for 20 or 30 years doing the same thing. So they don't have the staying power. Then there's all the political nonsense. So what I've learned over the years, and especially in the realm of partnerships, is you definitely have to engage the partners in the public sector, but you have to take the leadership, because if you stand back and think someone's going to take care of it, they're not. Even in the tow truck industry, just like the security guard industry. Actually, I'll get angrier now. In the security guard industry years ago, when they were revisiting the legislation and they were talking about a living wage, paying guards a proper wage, and Ontario was looking at doing what Quebec has done, regulating what the guards get paid, the industry said, no, we don't want to make those decisions.
Yeah.
We want government to make those decisions. Okay. And what do we have? We have a mess out there. We have guards doing really important work, not making a living wage, being abused, training standards are not where they need to be. I think industry groups, the towing industry, the security guard industry, we can't rely on government. We have to lead the charge. We have to work collaboratively with government because they've got the legislative capabilities that we're lacking. But we're the subject matter experts. We're the ones that have the vested interest. It's got to be driven by us. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I just lost my thought. There's something about vaccines that will come back to me.
Maybe you put down that beer and start more thinking.
I try to stay hydrated, okay?
Yeah, the tow truck one is like when I heard that story today, and I just shook my head because it brought me back to the days when I was on the policing in the front line, and you'd go to those accident scenes, and they were like vultures. There's 5, 6 different crews out there. Everybody knew that most of them are connected to some kind of organized crime in some fashion, whether it's the Hells Angels or Italian organized crime or Eastern Europeans, whatever it is. They've all got their hands in it because it's so lucrative. And that was 20 freaking years ago. This is news to you today. They didn't want to do anything because there's no political will. No one was getting hurt. So who cares? Everybody was making a cut. Now all of a sudden people are getting shot. That's why it's an issue. Otherwise, it'd still be under the carpet.
And it's so sad on so many levels, this tow truck industry thing. I can only think of my late mother, broken down on the side of the highway. And one of these pirates show up, okay? And she's figuring, well, the police car is behind me. This guy must know what he's doing. And she gets fleeced and taken to the wrong body shop and charged exorbitant amount of money, okay, because she didn't know any better. And I think about the honest tow operators that are investing their life savings in buying equipment and trying to run a legitimate business, only to have some creep put a gun to his family's head and saying, no, you're not going to be working this stretch of the highway. It's just wrong on so many levels.
Yep.
And the thing that just got me so animated today is that the epiphany that the minister had during the press conference that we're going to try this out. Come on, guys. We were able to get to the moon in 10 years when Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon. We were able to get to Mars in a couple of years, okay? This is not rocket science. This is really, really simple. And we still screw it up.
It is, but it just speaks to the level of arrogance, disconnection they have with the everyday taxpayer in this country. You talk about the marijuana thing. when that first came out, we had, the company I worked for, we actually had properties that had already experienced legalization of marijuana. And so I reached out to them to share with me their experience. This is 2 years before we legalized it. And they sent me a report by a third party, independent. They weren't government, but it was supported by government, paid for by government. And basically the white paper that came out of that after 2 years of running legalized marijuana sales in Dallas, sorry, not Dallas, oh my God, Colorado, was that the market had become saturated with organized crime. In fact, they refer to them as the cartels. They don't even call it organized crime. So even a step higher when it comes to drugs, because the mob is sort of the second tier, I guess, in the States when it comes to drug running. The cartels are the big boys. They had saturated the market, was the term in that report. Now you as a Canadian and Prime Minister Fancy Socks there thinking in his wisdom, I could win a few votes out of this. What are the costs of the country what have they been to go down that road and completely ignoring that knowledge that had already been obtained through experience, right? Like why reinvent the wheel? To your point, this isn't rocket science. It's already been done. Go look at those reports, figure out what they did wrong, and fix it before you roll it out. Instead, we just rolled it out our way, and here we are. I think last year we saw that report come out saying that 80% of the market was organized crime, basically, in Canada. Big surprise, right? Like, to me, I don't find it newsworthy or shocking, and yet people in everyday public seem to your point, it's an epiphany. This is news to you, really? What do you watch all day? Where do you get your news from? Is it Disney?
And it's all politics, and when you operate in a political setting, it's not about doing the right thing. It's not about taking care of your constituents. It's about getting reelected, and you'll do what you need to do to get reelected. And that drug study that you referenced, okay, the government of Canada had access to all that information, okay, but there was a political means. It was a means to an end. They were trying to satisfy a promise they made to a portion of the electorate that wanted to smoke up. Okay. Yeah. It was one of the first things that they did when they got elected. Listen, I'm not opposed to it, at all. I quite honestly, and this might be another topic one day, I think all drugs should be decriminalized. I really do. I think quite honestly, if you're hooked on heroin or cocaine, you're not a criminal. Mm-hmm. It's a public health issue. Yeah. It should be dealt with that way, but that's a whole other topic. Yeah. But we did it knowing what the experience of other jurisdictions were and without putting in the proper safeguards. And we continue to have all sorts of problems with this industry. I remembered what I wanted to talk about with the vaccines. And what I wanted to say is I heard in today's news, AstraZeneca, that's been approved. It's coming to Canada. Yeah. It's not recommended for people over 65. So the government of Canada today on 3 o'clock news have said or the government of Ontario, that the AstraZeneca vaccine will not be offered to people over 65. Yeah. And as an older Ontario Canadian, I'm happy because, not sure what the effect is going to be. So that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So here's the problem. They've got, 400 or 600,000 doses that are coming, which is wonderful. It's not offered to anyone over 65. The Ontario schedule is that we're doing people over 80 now. We're going to do people under 65 July 1st. So we've got all this drug coming. Plus, here's the kicker. It expires on April 1st.
Isn't that great?
There is no plan to vaccinate anyone under 65. You would have thought in the last year, while I had my moon suit on, some person in government, some planner could have anticipated different scenarios. The thing that gets me, Luke, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. You're a lot smarter than me, and I've learned a lot from you. But when we planned for events, for the G20, for the Occupy Toronto movement, for all these security events that that occurred while we were in our other lives, we looked at all sorts of contingencies, and we planned for what we knew, and we had all sorts of contingencies. Well, what if this or what if that? And we had a plan. How the heck do these guys not have a plan? They're now scrambling that how do we get this into the arms of people under 65 before it expires? And who are we going to target? Is it going to be 60-year-olds, 50-year-olds? And how do we do one and not the other? They don't have a frigging clue.
No, they don't. And it doesn't get any better. That's the scary part. Like even today I was listening to, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the doctor's name, but they were again on 1010 because that's the I give them free advertising, I guess. But I was listening to them talk to one of the top doctors, and I believe it was in Ontario, and he was basically saying, about the vaccine, that it's basically an ongoing experiment. I get that. We don't know what the end game is, but basically there was a lot of, we're just doing this to go through the motions because it's really not going to change anything in the long run because of just the way things are falling in line and the variations are coming around. So it really becomes a convoluted mess. I think about, countries like Italy or France. They've been in this for a lot longer and a lot stricter than Canada has, and they've done a better job of rolling out vaccinations. They're both around 5 million now inoculated in their countries. But if you read the news today or yesterday, those countries are going into stricter lockdowns again. So what's the end game? And we haven't even talked about, the part that I always bring up, the economic consequences. Our economy is down the worst it's been since 1964 or 63, some ridiculous amount of time. What are we going to do to get us back on track? We're just going to stay in our freaking cubby holes until this passes over? That's not realistic. It's not practical.
Well, I didn't want to go there because I don't want to have to embarrass you again. But you know what? It's not practical, but it might be necessary. And I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it is. If we did it right the first time, we wouldn't be here. Like, I had this big debate with my son the other day, and I said, listen, you're against the lockdowns. Fair enough. Okay. Then go out and you want to see your friends. I understand that. So go for a walk with your friends and wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart. We don't want to do anything but complain. We want it to be, it's like a baby going, wow, 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 wow. We want it to be the way it used to be. Well, it's not. And again, I give the example of World War II and the Blitz of London, the bombings every night. I'm sure people had enough of it. But if you didn't go into the shelter at night to spend the night rather than your nice king-size bed in your nice warm apartment, you were toast the next morning. That's the reality. So we have to do what we have to do to get through this.
I'm gonna use a war analogy to push back on that because I will take it back even further to the battlefields of World War One, and that's to me is what we're doing. Everyone had a line that they stood behind, and then they'd charge the other side. They'd get machine gunned to hell, and then they'd send another line and another line until somebody figured out, hey, this isn't working. Let's use tanks instead. And that's what we're doing. We're just sending a line after another line after. Somebody needs to figure out, or at least take a pause and say, this isn't working. There's got to be something else out there because this just doesn't work.
Well, this is a great segue into the government kerfuffle with returning visitors to Canada and the mandatory hotel. I mean, it doesn't work because I saw some doofus interviewed on TV and he basically said, no friggin' way I'm getting the test. No friggin' way I'm going into the hotel. He said he got his $800 ticket. And then he looked at the camera and said, 800 is less than 2,000 or 3,000. Yep. How the hell did the government not anticipate this? Who the hell is running things and making decisions? It really is. You've got the Minister of Public Safety, Minister Blair, who is a person that has a lot of experience in public safety matters, and he's signing off on these things. I mean, to your point about that World War I analogy, that's probably a better analogy than mine, because you're right. If we did things right the first time, we wouldn't have to do it the second and third time. Like New Zealand, like Australia, maybe like Italy. I know they're
they haven't done it right.
Okay. I'm not that familiar.
They're ahead of us with vaccines, but they continue to lock them down and open. That's what it's a endless cycle.
If we're going to lock down, let's lock down. If we're not going to lock down, let's not lock down. I do not understand how and you said this many times, I can't see my son. You can't see your mother, but you can see 50,000 strangers in Walmart.
Yeah.
Where's the logic in that? Now, I know you have to eat, but here, rather than going to Walmart, why don't you go to the neighborhood butcher, help that part? Because quite honestly, if Walmart has trouble and Costco has trouble and the big box stores have trouble, so be it, okay? But if the little guy, the economy is 80% is small business. We have killed them. It's almost like organized crime saying, pay the protection and shut up and do as you're told. It's not right. And the biggest failure, I think, is we've gone through these lockdowns, which just went through motions. We said, you can't go out to see your mother or son. You got to socially isolate. You can't have Christmas, but it's okay to be on Dundas Square every Saturday or Queen's Park and to protest. listen, unless you're going to do it properly, don't do it at all. And on that, we do agree.
Well, yeah, we do agree on that. And I think like most people, I do take the precautions that I should take when I'm out there and I follow the direction. I think the failure, what I take issue with is that the failures, when they do happen, the government hasn't addressed them and they've
Yeah,
punished everybody for the
they do.
stupidity of a few,
Yeah. No, you're right.
right?
This whole thing, for example, of a mask. Well, if you have a medical excuse, you don't need a mask. Okay, if there's a medical
Hmm.
reason, and on the surface that sounds logical, but it discounts the fact that human beings are chancers, and that's an Irish term my Irish brother-in-law always throws my way. A chancer is an opportunist. I asked Danny, my son, today. I said, "Hey, Dan, we're talking about the similar thing." And I said, if you're on the 407 or the 401, do you follow the speed limit? He said, no, I go 120, 125. I said, okay. Do you do it when there's no PP car behind you or beside you? No. Well, why not? Because I'm going to get caught. Because there's a consequence. That he's not a bad person.
Yeah,
I do the same thing.
yeah.
If there's no consequence, it's not going to work. So then why have a rule that puts people out of business if you're not going to enforce it? If government just figured out, like, I was talking to a lot of police officers, and like I saw on TV, Peel Regional Police were at the airport talking about people that refuse to go into the
Yeah.
hotels, and they're choosing not to do anything because the law is not well conceived. Well, I got an idea. How about all those people that work at Queen's Park and at Parliament Hill in Ottawa, when they propose legislation, think it through. And think it through that at the end of the pointy sword is going to be some police officer or bylaw officer dealing with a doofus who's a chancer that tells the cop to F off.
Yeah.
Okay, what tools are we going to give that cop? And quite honestly, we've all seen the videos out of Calgary and Hull, Quebec, where police officers end up taking people down, and then they're the scourge of the earth. You
Hmm.
can't have it both ways. You can't support your public sector people and then shit on them when it doesn't work out for you politically. So I really think, to your point, it's been mishandled from the beginning. One of the things we talk about, we learn in emergency management is that you have to pivot. You've got to be prepared to modify the plan. I think you said it a few podcasts ago, and Bill Needle certainly talks about this, our last guest, that one of the first things that fail in an emergency is your plan.
Yeah.
And emergency management, IMS, ICS, is not about having a plan and sticking to it. They teach you how to react to changing inputs so that you've got an objective, which is to minimize the damage of the emergency, to return to normal as soon as possible, but you tweak the plan to that end. Well, why the heck isn't government tweaking the plan to the end? They're just reinventing it making it up as they go along.
Well, that's because they don't have a plan. They don't want to practice the plan. They may have a plan. It's just like our clients in the real world, though, Brian. They all have plans, but they're likely covered in 2-inch thick dust on the desk and haven't been looked at in years. And as an example, again, you talk about our government. They say, have they been through it before? Well, how about SARS? Huh? We've been through that. They did all kinds of consulting work on that. They had all kinds of white papers fall from that. They had all kinds of recommendations that apparently they acted on and that they were wiser for. And then here we are, day one into the real pandemic, because SARS compared to this, I guess, wasn't as serious.
SARS is a joke.
Yeah, and so day one into this pandemic, and they've dropped the ball like massively. You can't even say it's a small blip. They didn't have PPE. They didn't have. I would like to know when the last time was that any of those governments actually practiced or tabletop their pandemic plans before this epidemic hit. SARS was the last time.
And if they did it, and the consultant that facilitated ought to be sued and lose their license,
Yeah.
and they should call Brian Clean and Associates, and we'll do
Yeah.
it for them.
You're right.
Yeah. No, it's just ridiculous.
Maybe
You
you
know
need
what?
some of that marijuana.
I need some of that marijuana, that CBD oil. I tried that actually. My wife had some, so I tried some CBD oil to help me sleep, and
Yep.
it really makes you mellow. And I think the strength, I don't know if it's milligrams or what, but it was 15. And my wife switched it on me one day, and she had one which was CBD plus THC
Oh
that
boy.
was 30. And I took it at night, not looking at what I was taking. And I woke up. First of all, I was having these freaky, crazy dreams. I woke up to let the dogs out at 2 in the morning, and I felt like I was stumbling. And I said, "What the hell is wrong with me?" And I realized that she set me up for an overdose the night
Oh
before.
my God, this is your wife.
My
Did you
wife,
check? Did you check
the
the
police
insurance?
officer. Yeah, yeah. So I told her, I said, "You know what? I'm going to take the mellow stuff. I'm not as tough as you. You could take the heavy
Oh,
stuff.
it helps you sleep. Yeah, I do.
It
I
helps you
once in a
see."
while I'll do that.
Here's
I
my
don't do
hand.
it all the time, but I'll take a little gel when I need it. When I'm
Yeah, yeah.
stressed out, but that
Well,
won't be a problem today because I've been able to vent with you.
it comes in a gel pack. It's funny. The ones I use, I have to inject in my arm or between my toes.
I think you better
Is that
you
not
better
the
do
same?
you better ask your wife a few more questions.
Yeah. Hey, it makes sense now. She works in the evidence room. Okay,
Uh,
so another thing that drives me crazy, it drives me absolutely crazy, it's political talk. You
yep.
see it on both sides of the border, where you ask a question. I just saw the Minister of Procurement interviewed by Aaron Solomon, the radio guy, the
Yep.
TV, I forget his name right now. Anyways, asked a question about did the government make a mistake by not procuring enough vaccines or a homegrown solution? And the answer was, well, the government of Canada is dedicated to the safety and
Yep.
well-being of Canadians. He asked the question 5 times, and the last 3 of the 5 times, yes or no. Did the government of Canada make a mistake? Well, to reiterate, the government is focused on the safety and well-being of Canadians. Minister Blair does the same thing.
Yep.
The Americans do the same. Like, do they think we're idiots? I know exactly what they're doing. You have some communication specialists that said these are the talking points. Stick to the talking points. And they're like a bunch of trained seals. It just drives me crazy. How about some honesty? You know what? God forbid, I might even vote Liberal and Trudeau if they said we messed up. It
I can
was
see why
uncharted.
Carolyn's trying to kill you now.
It was uncharted territory. We have never dealt with a pandemic in our lifetime of this magnitude, and we thought we were doing the right thing, but we messed up. But this is what we're doing to fix it. Just like I say to clients when I mess up, that would be so refreshing if a political leader would do it. Then I would believe them and I would trust them. But they won't do that. And it just makes me angrier and more despising of what they represent.
They won't do that because they don't have to do that, and I laid the blame for that squarely on you, me, the listeners, the
Right.
freaking population, because we keep accepting that bullshit and we vote these putzes in. Granted, we don't have a lot of options. There are putzes in all areas, like you said, on all parties, but we've allowed that to happen because we continue to put these idiots in power, and that's what gets them the votes.
At the end of the day, we get the government we
Yep.
deserve. A friend of my wife, a friend of ours, I've had some real interesting debates that actually get me angry. And she's always maintained, she's a very smart woman, works for the government actually, and she said she's always maintained that the electorate are too stupid
Yep.
to vote. And it was almost like a Hillary Clinton line about the deplorables. And you know, I started off as a liberal. I started off as a naive social worker,
Yeah.
cappuccino drinking person. I really thought there's no evil in the world. It's just people lacking opportunity. You know, but I've experienced life, and so I used to be really angry with her, and I used to say, you know, that's just condescending, and shame on you to say things like that. But you know what? She's freaking right. She really is. When I look at Donald Trump, my wife and I had this talk about Trump. We both despise that man. But she was saying that Trump's the problem. And I said, Trump's not the problem.
No.
It's
Yeah.
the people that vote him in
Yeah.
are the problem. You could shoot, and I don't advocate to shoot the man. He can die of natural causes. But it's Trumpism that's the problem. And Trudeau's not the problem. You know, it goes back to the story I gave you that I was telling my son about speeding on the 401. You don't speed on the 401 if there's no PP cruiser beside you because there's going to be a consequence to your action. We allow government to do the most egregious things and there's no consequence. And you might ask, what would that consequence be? Well, we talk with our vote. You know,
Yeah.
people say, what can we do about Trump? What can we do about Trudeau? What can we do about Aaron O'Toole? Easy. Every 4 years, kick their ass out. Politicians their DNA is to get reelected. That's their DNA. So if we tell them, if you want to get reelected, you have to do the people's work, they'll do the work. But we let them do anything,
Yeah.
get away with it, and there's no consequence.
Yep. And I would certainly expand that blame to the opposition, because without an incompetent opposition, you wouldn't have to have you wouldn't have to make the choice to elect a Trump. Like the Democrats have failed just as badly as the Republicans have, and we're seeing that now with some of the crap that's going on with Biden and his crew. They're no different. They just call themselves different, but they're the same quality of leader.
I remember when I was in university, I was in political science and history, and there was a term I was really interested in 20th century history and the wars, World War II, and there's a concept called might is right. And if you look at the map of Europe, it has changed in the 20th century so many times. Alsace-Lorraine's in France, it's in Germany, it's in Hungary, it's here. Well, Alsace-Lorraine isn't, but the borders, Yugoslavia, things like that. Okay,
Yep.
It was because the ruins go to the winner type thing. Might is right. I was going to make such a fantastic point.
You are on something today.
You know what it is? It's the marijuana oil and the Guinness is just having an effect on me.
All right. Well, I'm looking at my clock, and we are closing up on the hour. But I've had a good chat today. I appreciated you allowing me to vent on you a little, because I'm just fed up with all the crap that we're hearing, that we're seeing. I'm so disappointed in the naivety. What did you call it? The epiphany that people seem to have about things that, to me, have been so blatantly obvious for years and years. And it's only now coming to light because people are getting hurt, or there's a political interest, and that's the only reason why it's coming to light. But, I think we are in a world of hurt over the next few months. I don't see an end to the COVID anytime soon. And as we see by this tow truck fiasco, their solutions I don't think are going to work either. It's just same old, I guess, as we move forward.
Well, you know what, though? We're in a period of time right now where things are not going as good as we need to. But there's no doubt in my mind, the Earth has been around for hundreds of millions of years. People have been around for tens of millions of years. And we will be at a bar with our friends, having a beer, going to a hockey game again in the future. And I think that's going to be sooner than later. There truly is light at the end of the tunnel. My brother and I had this debate, and he said with the U.S. election, he says the U.S. is just screwed. It will never be the same. And I said, well, Biden's job is he's going to have to rebuild the country. He's going to have to unify the country. He said it's not going to happen. I said, Mark, it's going to happen. It has to happen. If we don't get back to normal in the U.S. from a political point of view, the world comes to an end. The world relies on American stability. So the point is that after every hurricane, after every thunderstorm, the sun comes up. And we start over, and there's a renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
And renaissance is French for there's a rebirth, okay? And we will emerge from this as well. It's just like any war, we have to survive till it's over to start to rebuild. So I'm very optimistic. I really believe, and I'm reading, the summer is looking a lot different than it did last year in a positive sort of a way. The variants are a problem, I would agree, but the vaccines are on the horizon. The Americans are starting to get vaccinated. I was going to say euthanized, vaccinated, and
don't start that rumor.
And the vaccines are starting to roll in Canada. I'm very, very optimistic that I'm going to be on my motorcycle this summer. I might even get a trip or two in. So I feel good. I think right now, unlike the government of Ontario that said they're going to put an iron ring around old age homes and did nothing when they could have, I'm now preparing for an uptake in business, an uptake in quality of life with my family and my friends, and maybe actually seeing you for a beer for the first time in a year instead of seeing you over Skype. So I really think that times are ahead.
And I'm actually starting to look at some bikes, and hopefully I'll be able to buy one and ride over and have that beer with you, because that's long overdue.
Fantastic.
So on that, I think we should wrap it up. I'm sweating from all the
Well, just before we go, do you want to tell them about our special guest next episode?
Do you have one?
No. I thought I would mention it.
Well, we're working on one. I just don't know who he is yet.
Well, you know what? Seriously speaking, to our listeners, to our hundreds of thousands of listeners, actually to our two listeners, Mom and Dad, if you know of someone that you think might be a good guest, why don't you drop us a line? Either drop us a line at our website at the comment section, brianclayman.com, or at info@brianclayman.com. That's BRIANCLAMAN.com. And just say, hey, why don't you invite President Trump as your next guest? And we'll have our producers call ex-President Trump and we'll set it up.
If he's not in jail, but that's a good
We'll interview him in jail.
You'd be willing to do a Skype call from there.
Yeah.
Brian, I think that summarizes things very well. Always happy to hear back from our audience and our listeners. Please leave us some comments if you want to cover topics. You know, you may not have a speaker that we want to reach out to, but certainly you might have a topic of interest that we're happy to do some research on and talk about. So with that, until next time, talk to you later. See ya.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
That concludes this podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and will join us in a couple of weeks for our latest episode. Please remember to like and follow us on our sponsor's webpage, brianclayman.com, where you can leave us your comments and suggest topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to protect your assets.